the world around us, damaging our milieu, damaging the creatures in our world.
Thank you. One of the things that your comment suggests to me, and I hope I'm following your train of thought here, is that my quick example was the courses I teach in race studies and what is anti-racism. But maybe this is a huge challenge for us collectively when we think about ecology. You know, thinking about how do you, what are the actions of not harming and of nurturing an environment that isn't so full of aggrandizement of human action that says, well, we'll manage ecology and therefore things will work out. Well, we've had a chance to look back at those efforts at managed ecology and see, well, those good intentions did pave the road to hell, as you said earlier. Maybe that's a context to think about the non-harm framework.
And just to add to it, I mean, you're talking about race studies, but I mean, how much of our injury to the native peoples of this hemisphere has been done because people were thinking we can do some good for them. You just think of the residential schools. I mean, in general, I mean, wouldn't, in some sense, things have been better if people had stood back and simply said, wait a minute, what harm are we contemplating doing here? Instead of just constantly asking what good can be achieved. Right.
Thank you. I really appreciate the complexity of this issue, and I appreciate the points that's been raised regarding sort of how subjective it is to say what is good, just like you mentioned with the residential schools. And it's completely culturally subjective within different groups. But I'd also just like to raise the point that what is doing no harm is also completely subjective. I have a lot of family involved in the medical profession, and I'm aware that the Hippocratic Oath is in fact no longer taken at medical schools. And there's at both the U of A Medical School and the University of Calgary Medical School, there's a Hippocratic Oath Club for just a small group of students that have committed to pledging the Hippocratic Oath in its original form. Because even within that, the idea of doing no harm has taken on completely different subjective meanings in different people's cultural and religious understanding of what is doing harm to the lives of others. And within the context of the medical profession, that has a lot of its roots in issues like abortion and euthanasia and that sorts of things. But what is both doing harm and doing good is really difficult to determine. And we have to sort of be aware when we commit to doing no harm that we can also really rationalize in our minds sometimes what is not doing harm. And that's something we have to be careful of because our society can even sometimes convince us that something isn't doing harm. So, I don't know, just another layer of complexity there.
Thank you for this. And it seems to me that, what is it? There's a sense of, I use the word of righteousness, of, you know, the righteous sense of I know what the good is. And I suppose the obverse of that sense of righteousness is humility before the complexity that you're talking about. You know, recognizing, and this is, we've seen this so much in kind of public political culture, the effort to simplify rather than to see the complex, right? And to say, okay, this is easy. Let's just clarify things and we'll move forward. And there's that kind of restlessness for action that then wants a simple path and won't face the complexity that, you know, what do we understand harm to be? And a righteous idea of I already know, I'm already moving. Yeah.
I'd just like to touch upon what this young lady was talking about with the subjectivity. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't want to make a straw man and then blow it over. But just from my own readings about subjectivity versus objectivity in moral action, I think the contemplative, I would like to think this anyway, I would like to think that our contemplations are towards good, because I'm sure we can be a contemplative criminal too, and a very efficient one, If you wanted to be very contemplative, just go to prison and learn lots of tricks. But your goals as a criminal are the wrong goals. Now, if they're the wrong goals, it must mean there's some right goals, or a right goal. The trick, or the problem is it's exceedingly difficult to find those objective, correct goals, or proper goals, or right goals, or fill in the blank, however you want to describe that objective morality. That's pretty much what I had to say with the objectivity, subjectivity part.
The element that I appreciate here is, I had said earlier that our conversation hasn't had too much to say so far about the traditions or that inform our sense of the contemplative. What are the traditions or the kind of ideas of where knowledge or something reliable for value systems comes from? So there is the whole thing of the subjective. We do interpret these things from our experience and from our own place in the world. But if these become simply our own projections of the world, then how do they just become other than just our own kind of everybody for themselves, et cetera, et cetera? So it's, we live these tensions. We live after the time where the secure logos kind of idea of we know the rules and they came through this single tradition. We live after that time. We live in multiple trajectories of tradition, understandings of where the values come from, and how do we think those in this time.
I have a comment to make about our not doing bad and doing good. I liked your word nurturing versus doing good. Nurturing has a different connotation to it, especially if you're a mom or of that sort. You know, the nurturing, it almost gives the person receiving it a chance to say whether it's providing them with something they need or not. Where just doing good doesn't have that evaluation from the person receiving it. My comment.
Thank you. I want to say things about reciprocity, but I think there's another comment coming and we should just keep going. I've heard lots from me.
Well, I just wanted to raise two names that I'm surprised we haven't heard yet this afternoon that are archetypical in the discussion of action and contemplation. The names of Mary and Martha. And thinking about Martha, what she was doing wasn't bad, it was good, but it wasn't enough. Mary had chosen a better part. And I don't think I want to pursue that further, but I think it's a theme that deserves to be thought about.
I don't know if people are all familiar with the biblical tradition, but this is the story of Jesus visits the home of Mary and Martha. These are sisters. He's storytelling and teaching. Martha is busy working in the home, making sure there are provisions for the guests and so on, and complains that her sister Mary is just hanging out listening to the discussion, much like we're all doing here, except for the folks who are helping us out with the tea. And when she complains to Jesus, he says, Mary has chosen the better way. So this is the person who's being active in providing, the person who's listening and engaging in the conversation, taking in. Maybe the framework of nurturing could incorporate Mary and Martha in interesting and new ways. I don't know. Is listening a kind of nurturing, as is provision for the group who are there?
I just really wanted to respond about the Mary and Martha thing, because maybe what it's getting at is the act that Mary was doing, which again, it's sort of that whole, is contemplation an act or not, Mary was listening to Jesus is sort of what the story tells us. And I think that's what Jesus was focusing on, and I think Martha could have been, it's sort of that whole thing we talked about earlier, it's how you do something, right? Martha was, I think the contrast he was making, Martha could have just as easily been listening to Jesus while she was doing things, right? But maybe her complaints about Mary were getting in the way, right? So I don't think that, my read isn't that that's a division, that the action is good and the contemplation is the better part. But it's sort of, again, back to how we do the activity. Are we listening to what is going on in the moment, or are we fretting about things?
You know, I'm not an academic, and so a lot of what's been discussed here today is sort of going like right over my head. But I want to go right back to the title of the session today, which says, you know, dividing the contemplative from the active is a false binary or whatever. For me, the contemplative isn't thinking versus acting, it's being versus being busy. So it's busy versus, or it's being versus doing. And I come out of a very strong Christian Reformed tradition, out of the Reformation, where you were always thinking, and there was always lots of just, you know, good theological discussions, and you were always working really hard. And one of the things that I've started to think about in my own life, and Eckhart Tolle has framed this a little bit for me, is to just be. And that by being, that I don't fret about tomorrow or think about the past, and so I'm just present to the moment. And that in doing that, I have learned, like, because I was so nervous about talking, I didn't hear half of the last little bit of the conversation, so I couldn't even speak to any of the examples. But for me, it would have been, for me, the being is to be present in this space right now and see the people that are around me and enjoy the artwork on the wall rather than thinking about what I need to say next. And so I'm listening attentively to people. And so for me, it isn't, I did a lot of that thinking stuff, and I was raised with that, right? And the acting stuff or the doing. But it's the being, and the being has allowed me, in fact, to be present to the people each day and to be present to the moment. So the beauty of the morning or whatever, instead of always thinking about tomorrow or yesterday or what I need to do or what I didn't do or how people thought about me. And it's profoundly changed the way I live my life. So for me, it is really that being and doing, and the being has allowed me to do in a very different way because of that being. And it's about being present to the moment. So just...
Thank you for bringing us back to this really kind of core element. And it is, I was earlier saying, I'm aware of the wash of words in this afternoon. And that leads us into the, given the context, it leads us into the intellectual. We're in a room full of, I don't know how many of us are here, 60, 70 people. It's not the kind of conversation where you can sit down and say, who are you today? What's happening with you? And it's not that kind of intimate conversation. So it tends to go to the level of the intellectual. That's what is kind of, what is it, a public form of exchange that enables us to have dialogue together, but it isn't the same as that being that you're talking about, that kind of presence that's not exclusive of the intellectual, but is centered in the kind of sensory experience of the moment. And thank you for bringing us back to that.
Well, I wouldn't argue that this is not allowing for that intimacy. It's a different kind of learning from each other, right? And I'm not excluding that. I mean, I don't need to know people a different way, but it's being present to the people in the room that through the not thinking all the time or getting into my headspace, that really allows me to listen to what other people are saying. And yeah, it informs my own thinking, but it's a different way of thinking for me than, I'm probably doing a bad job of explaining